I'm not usually all that interested in how other people respond to the books I review, but I am going to be very curious to see how other people respond to Critical Dilemma by Neil Shenvi and Pat Sawyer. I think this book could generate some very interesting responses. I think there could be people who hate one of the three major sections and then love others. And at the same time, there will be those who love one section of the book and hate the rest. There may be some who won't be able to stand the book as they start out, and then they'll start to love it toward the middle. And there'll be other people who love it at first, and then they'll want to throw it away after it really gets rolling. Some people will read it and see it as an encyclopedia on critical theory issues, who read bits and parts, and other people who will just devour this book from cover to cover. Critical Dilemma is a much-needed book that fills a critical void when it comes to the controversies regarding critical theories today, and oh, there are a lot of controversies regarding critical theory today. So let me tell you why this book is so important, and also why I am very curious to see how other people will respond to it. Welcome to Rev Reads. If you want to discover more books that will help you stand for the truth of God's Word in an ever-increasingly hostile world, please subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with my latest book reviews. Also, please like this video. Share it with other people on social media because that goes such a long way in helping other people know about the fine work of Neil Shenvi and Pat Sawyer. First, I want to cover the void that this book fills, because I think this might be the most important aspect of Critical Dilemma. So far, the books on critical or woke issues fall into one of two extreme categories, in my view. First, there are the books that promote critical theory, ranging from Karl Marx to the works of Michael Foucault, Kimberly Crenshaw, Angela Harris, and more. And there are many, many more of these books. Most of these books, though, are written for academics, and a lot of people would rather stick a pencil in their eye than read through those books. And then there are the Christian books that are confronting CRT and wokeness head on. I've read and reviewed many of these, such as Fault Lines by Vodi Bakum, Erased by John Amanchukwu, Why Social Justice is Not Biblical Justice by Scott David Allen, and Kingdom Race Theology by Tony Evans. And there are many, many more of these books. Now, I would say the Christian books are written for the most part for those in the pews, your typical Christian, in order to confront the impacts that critical theory is having on our society today. So for the most part, they don't confront critical theory itself. The Christian books are dealing with the places where queer and critical theory are touching our own lives. So that's not the work of Derek Bell and the other authors that I previously listed and many more. So it's easy for critical theorists to dismiss the books by Christian authors as not actually dealing with critical theory, since their books are more confronting the actions of corporations, commercials, speeches of politicians, and more. Now, let me be clear. I think the Christian works so far that are addressing critical theory are immensely important, and I think they are confronting these views where they should be confronted, and that is at the point where critical race and queer theory touches our individual lives. But this makes Critical Dilemma by Shenvi and Sawyer so important, because they step onto what has rather been untouched ground so far. They give a Christian examination and response to the academic works and views of critical theories and social justice that no one else is really doing, or maybe other works have sort of briefly touched on. So Sawyer and Shenvi are confronting the academic works. They are driving straight into those. And their critique, their examination of those works is excellent. How do I know it's excellent? Well, as I was reading through chapters 2 through 7 on understanding critical theory, multiple times I thought, I cannot believe Shenvi supports critical theory now. This book isn't critiquing it at all. I don't think this is a dilemma for them, but I think they believe it's a good thing. I don't know who this Pat Sawyer guy is, but he must have corrupted Shenvi. This is not the guy that I have been following on Twitter. But as it turns out, Shenvi and Sawyer were just accurately describing critical theories using the very words of its proponents. It was very easily the best descriptions I have read so far because, in my opinion, a great critique, for the most part, should allow the defenders of the belief that is being critiqued to say, yeah, you got my view right. You described us as we see ourselves. So if you read Critical Dilemma and you want it to be more critical of wokeness as you're reading it, you need to make sure you keep reading through the entire book in order to see that. So what we have here in Critical Dilemma is a well-written description of the views that they are critiquing. One that is accurate, one that is not straw man, and this is what we want. We want the best representation we can have of these views that we're trying to expose and show their errors. And I have read a lot on CRT issues so far, even reading some of the original sources myself, and this book is the best at presenting critical and queer theories by a mile. I mean, for me, one of the best chapters in this book is the chapter on positive insights from CRT. And as I started that chapter, part of me was saying, there are no positive insights from CRT. I don't want to see any of those. But then they listed several positive insights and explained in all of those places why Christians should have common ground on these issues, such as some aspects of gender expression and gender roles are socially constructed, which is true. And the section on race is a social construct, which it is. It was a really good section. And what this chapter does is it challenged me to be fair in my own thinking. And it delivered great insights by the author to help us find common ground in those places where we have it. But then the book hits its critique on critical theories. And to me, their critiques were all the more devastating because they just spent such care and accuracy to describe critical theories to begin with. There were good points on Christian faith in this section, such as the church's primary mission is preaching the gospel, not enacting social justice. They also revealed how contemporary critical theory is not primarily a political issue or even a justice issue. And this is why I've been covering a lot of these books on my channel, but this is a gospel issue. CRT proponents are preaching another gospel. They have another form of guilt that brings condemnation and another way to bring salvation that is outside of faith in Jesus Christ. And another part of the book that I appreciated is that the reader is also able to clearly see why hegemonic power as oppression is the most illogical part of their system, but also the most fundamental for every aspect of it. And what I'm referring to is the idea that dominant ideas or practices of a society are not oppressive simply because they are held by the majority, and therefore the minority struggle with the language or the clothing fashions, or they don't care for the most common foods at the grocery store. The desires and the traditions of the majority aren't oppressive by nature because the majority hold to them and the minority feel lost and left out because they don't. But you must see the views of the majority as oppressive in order to accept critical theory. I appreciate how they were willing to directly and honestly say that CRT is just not compatible with Christianity in either salvation or discipleship. CRT runs in opposition to the Christian faith. And as a pastor, the chapter on ideas that will devastate your church, that might be the most important chapter because it helps pastors to see how they could unknowingly be drawn into a godless ideology that is opposed to the gospel without even realizing it. And this chapter also shines a light on the type of language that a pastor needs to look out for that will be used by those in their churches or the leaders of their denomination those individuals who will be trying to bring CRT ideas into the church. So it lets you know what words, what phrases you need to look out for to keep CRT out of our churches. But the most troubling chapter for many will be the chapter on queer theory. In that chapter, we read, "The central organizing feature of queer theory is the rejection of all norms and the destabilization of all categories. To quote critical theorist David Halpern, queer is, by definition, whatever is at odds with the normal, the legitimate, and the dominant." What this means is that when it comes to the entire queer view, the queer community, they have a very specific agenda, and that is end all norms in sexuality and gender. So there is no more man, no more woman, also no more adult, no more child. There is only this one fluid, do whatever you want with whoever you want mentality. Just make sure you get consent first, but if you don't give consent, you may be called a bigot. It's terrible stuff coming out of the queer movement, and it will only get worse as presented in this chapter. In closing, out of all the books I have read on issues of justice and wokeness, Critical Dilemma is both the most thorough and delivers the best critique. Neil Shenvi and Pat Sawyer have brought us a work that is head and shoulders above its peers. So if you own one book on these issues, Critical Dilemma must be that one